Okay, welcome back, guys. We're going to continue with our material for muscular system. Last video was on the shorter side for sure. This one's going to be a little bit lengthier, just in general, just going over content that we have for muscular. So here's where we left off. We were talking about the characteristics of a skeletal muscle cell or skeletal muscle tissue. We need to talk about the characteristics of the other two types of muscle as far as our smooth and our cardiac muscle. So we're going to talk about that, and then we'll get a little bit more into skeletal stuff as well, because skeletal muscle, no doubt about it, is the star of the show. That's where we're going to spend most of our time. Okay, now before we move forward, let's continue with skeletal muscle just a little bit more. There are three major structures of skeletal muscles that we need to keep in mind. We have the endomysium, we have the perimysium, and we have the epimysium. I'll actually erase a little bit of that there. So the endo, epi, and perimysium, those are the three main layers of a skeletal muscle as far as anatomically you're concerned. All you got to do is pay attention to the prefix. Endomysium is going to be the innermost layer, and that's what we see here. Perimysium is that outer layer, and then epimysium, or is that middle layer, sorry, and then epimysium is the outermost layer. If you're someone that likes to eat meat, that's the layer that you're going to consume. That's the layer that's going to be that you're biting into. Like imagine eating chicken wings, for instance. There are some other things that we see here as well. Like for instance, you can see the blood vessels right here. Every single organ requires blood to survive, right? You can also see a fascicle, which is basically like the perimysium being pulled out a little bit so we can see it a little bit clearer. But we also see the tendon. It doesn't matter what muscle this is, as long as we know we can tell it's a skeletal muscle because it's connected to a bone. That's the key thing here. Now, there is another layer that surrounds the epimysium. You don't see it on this picture, but it's called the fascia. The fascia would be like this outer film, very thin film. We don't really talk too much about it, but sometimes with meat, especially raw meat, you'll see like a thin film surrounding it, and that's just the fascia. It's usually cooked off when in the cooking process. Regarding the skeletal muscle attachments, honestly, the big thing here to keep in mind, once again, is just understand how tendons work. Tendons are a connective tissue that will connect the muscle to the bone. Ligaments are going to connect bone to bone. Okay, now let's finally get into smooth muscle characteristics. Let's learn about what makes a smooth muscle so unique. So, in regards to smooth muscle characteristics, there's a reason why we call it smooth, right? It has no striations. None whatsoever. It's as smooth as it gets. The cells are spindle shaped, which is what we see here. They're single nucleated. This is interesting to stand out or to look at because that is a unique trait in this circumstance compared to the skeletal muscles. They're involuntary. This is yet again something that stands out too. You have no conscious control. It will happen on its own. We find this mainly in the walls of hollow organs. So what are we considering hollow organs? Well, in this circumstance, we'll just write it out over here. Our hollow organs are going to be organs from the digestive system. So that includes your esophagus, your stomach, your intestines, your rectum, your anus, the whole thing. Organs from the urinary system, mostly the bladder in this case. The ureter as well would fall under this category. And then even organs from the reproductive system. The uterus or the womb in women is going to be surrounded by smooth muscle, which is essential for the birthing process and labor. Men do have some smooth muscle around the testes as well, which helps to move the sperm for ejaculation, which we'll talk about that when we do reproductive system way later. All right. Finally, regarding smooth muscle, let me move this out of the way again. Finally, regarding smooth muscle, we have the fact that it's a slow, sustained, and tireless muscle. That's big. So, unlike skeletal muscle is this high octane muscle, right? It's just boom. It's a lot of force, tires out quickly. Smooth muscle, on the other hand, by design, is supposed to be this methodical, slow process. That's the entire idea. All right. Finally, we have cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle is going to be Interesting. Number one, the easiest thing to keep in mind is that it's only found in the heart, hence the name cardiac, right? But what is really interesting here is that the traits of cardiac muscle can be found in different tissue. So, for instance, it has striations. We found striations in the skeletal muscle. So, it's similar to skeletal in the sense that it has these grooves, these visible bands. What else? It is also typically single nucleated. Smooth muscle is what's typically single nucleated. So now we're seeing similarities. It's kind of like a hybrid muscle, if you think of it that way. It's joined to another muscle cell at an intercalated disc. We don't have to worry too much about that. It is involuntary. You have no control of this muscle because you have no control of your heart. There are things you can do to lower your heart rate, to increase your heart rate, of course, but you can't stop your heart. That's not how that works. Last but not least, this works at a steady pace. So here's my analogy that I think works really well to understand this. Imagine you're a spectator watching a race. There are three runners, three different lanes, right? In lane one, you have the first runner and it's skeletal muscle. In lane two, you have the second runner and it's smooth muscle. And in lane three, you have the third runner and it's cardiac muscle. As soon as the race starts, bang, they fire the race gun, right? I think there's a particular name for that, but either way, they fire the gun. Racer number one, skeletal muscle. That's the racer who's sprinting out the gate. They're super fast. Does that mean they finish the race? Not necessarily, but they're going to go out the gate really quick because they generate a lot of force quickly. Racer number two is going to be the slow one. That's the smooth muscle. This person is walking the entire race. It may take them 2 hours, but they'll finish. Racer number three, cardiac. This person's jogging the whole race. They know that they can set a steady pace and maintain that pace, and they'll be able to finish the whole thing. So that's a great analogy to understand how these three types of muscles work. Now, before we move forward into our next set of material, as far as like more generic information and even more skeletal muscle information, I do want to make sure we're comfortable with the concepts associated with regarding, let me see if I can find an area that works. This might be okay. The concepts regarding the three muscle groups. So we're just going to do a little bit more practice. Simply put, we're just going to do a little bit of Venn diagramming. So let's just draw. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and erase all that first of all. But let me flip this over. There we go. Just so it's a little easier for me to draw on this. Okay, so let's go ahead and get some circles. So let's draw one here. Let's draw one here. And we'll draw one here. All right, not bad. Let's say that the black circle, Let's say that the black circle is skeletal. Fix that E a little bit. Let's say that the red circle is going to be cardiac. Sorry, I was drawing a blank there. And then the blue circle is going to be smooth. Okay. Well, we've seen Venn diagrams before, right? This isn't exactly a brand new concept. Let's first try to highlight the stuff that we can identify, right? So let's try to highlight the stuff that we can first identify easily. So let's see here. Maybe it'll let me. There we go. Let's go ahead and just use green. So in green, simply put, what is the one thing that all three of these things have in common? Common sense. They're all muscles, right? Now, let's go back to this and say, okay, well, what about the other stuff? What are some things that are unique? Skeletal. So one of the things that makes skeletal muscle unique is that it is multinucleated. So I'm just going to write multinucleus. So it is multinucleated. So what about the other ones? Are they multinucleated? Are they single nucleated? Well, they're actually single nucleated, and they share that in common between cardiac and smooth. So we're going to use a new color. Let's go ahead and use this orange. So this orange is going to indicate everything that is shared between cardiac and smooth. So for now, the trait that is being shared between the two is that it's single nucleated, or just one nucleus in the cells, right? Okay. What else is unique about the skeletal? Well, in regards to skeletal, we have some other traits as well that we need to keep in observation, right? We know that skeletal muscle is also voluntary. We have control of this muscle. We don't have control of cardiac and smooth. So, hey, we just found another thing that stands out for these two. Okay. What else? What else is unique to skeletal, or what else is a trait that we can associate with skeletal? Let's see. Another trait that is associated with skeletal is that it is striated. But there's another structure that is striated too. So actually, let's use this color here, if it'll let me. Oh, this is the Galaxy pen. It's okay. This works too. Nice and crazy colors. All right, so now we have this region that is between the cardiac and skeletal. So it's a shared trait between the two. So I'm actually going to put that down here. So the shared trait between the two is going to be striated. Striated. So there's a striation between the two. Okay, back to skeletal. We mentioned multinucleated, striated. We mentioned it's voluntary. Okay. So what's next? I actually forgot to mention for this, it's involuntary. I accidentally put voluntary. So what's next? We can think about the location. Where do we find these particular muscles? In skeletal, we find it in the bones, as it's implied, right? These are muscles that are found on the bones, if you want to be more precise. In cardiac, it's of course going to be found on the heart. That's my rough rendition of a heart. And then in, see if I can fix that for us. There we go. In smooth muscle, it's going to be in the hollow organs. There's a lot of different organs that it's going to be associated with, but hollow organs is sufficient, right? Last but not least, what's one of the last things that we can identify? The speed of how effective these muscles work. Skeletal, by definition, is fast. It's fast. It generates a lot of energy, a lot of force, but it's quick in how it does things. Cardiac is steady, consistent. And finally, smooth is going to be slow. That's what we expect to see here as far as the differences between these three types of muscle. So if you can recognize stuff like this, I think you're in a pretty good place, you know? And this is just something visual that helps me better learn and better understand what I need to see. Okay, so I'm going to bring it back here. Okay, so a little bit about the functions of muscles. We actually haven't even talked yet about like what's the muscles, what are they doing? What's their purpose? Number one, the most common sense one is they allow for movement. Now, in regards to that, you should recognize that it is allowing for movement, but it requires the skeleton. You need the skeleton for movement to occur. That is a must. If you don't have the skeleton, you're not going to move. You'd be a blob on the ground spazzing without the skeleton. And of course, the opposite is true too. If you had a skeleton, you're going to look like a human, but you won't be able to even get up or walk. Posture. Posture is a big deal, especially with regards to back health and back strength. Honestly, the big thing there is just do some exercises to help improve your back, improve your flexibility. Yoga goes a long way with this. Pilates, Tai Chi, all these type of things that are not as intensive. Weightlifting is always a great option too. You just have to be careful. Make sure you know the proper form, you're doing the right amount of weight, all that type of stuff. Stabilizing joints. Your joints allow your body to do all these crazy range of motion that we have, right? So the idea regarding that is that your muscles help to provide a base level of stability for those joints. Makes sense. So if you improve your muscular strength, less stress on the joints, leading to less cases of like arthritis and other conditions that could be pretty bad. So you want to make sure that you can help improve the healthiness of your joints. Generate heat, even though this is Florida and or this is being recorded in Florida, but even though this is Florida and it doesn't really get too cold, if you are in a colder situation and your body temperature is dropping below 98.6, your body will start to shiver. Your muscles will start to spasm to try to generate as much heat as possible in a short period of time. It won't let you survive for long, but it's better than nothing. Sorry. Okay, moving forward. Okay, now let me go ahead and go a couple slides back just so we really see what we're about to talk about. So here was a picture of a muscle, right? A skeletal muscle. Now we're focusing on this guy, a muscle fiber, a muscle cell, as we call it. So, as far as the muscle cells are concerned and the muscular skeletal muscle, we know that they're multinucleated. In fact, you can see all the nuclei right here, and right here. The nuclei are beneath the sarcolemma. So what is that sarcolemma? Let's talk about that too. The sarcolemma is a specialized plasma membrane. That's really what it is. It's just a special version of the plasma membrane. Remember the phospholipid bilayer, as it's called? It's just a gate. It's going to prevent things from entering or exiting and choose what moves where. Now, there's a unique structure here called the sarcoplasmic reticulum. This is very interesting. I'm actually going to re-underline that. Sarcoplasmic reticulum. Now, if you remember your biology, you'll notice that it's a special version of the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. The endoplasmic reticulum, there's a rough and smooth. The rough endoplasmic reticulum helps with creation of particular nutrients and proteins. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum helps with storing those particular things. So really, this special version of sarcoplasmic reticulum helps to store proteins. Why would your muscles need more proteins? Well, that's what we're going to learn more about in this unit. Your muscles require a ton of proteins because they're consistently breaking down. You're shedding the muscles and breaking them apart when you're exercising. But that's a good thing. That's actually a good thing. You want that to happen. Last but not least, to conclude this video, you see this little myofibril right here, this little tube. We're going to talk a little bit about that before we finish the video today. A myofibril is bundles of myofilaments, which are these tiny, tiny structures. Myofibrils are aligned to give distinct bands. Let me go ahead and fix that while we're in video. There are two major bands that we need to know, and honestly, that's what we're going to focus on for this slide. I band and A band. I band is the lighter region, which is why we call it the light band. A band is this darker region, which is why we call it the dark band. That's all you got to know. A band and I band, they're forming the light and dark side of the protein or of the muscle. That's it. Why this is relevant is because this is all going to be necessary for how a muscle contracts. That's what we're going to get more into in the following videos. Okay, so I thank you guys for tuning in for this one. I appreciate it. It was a bit on the lengthier side, but overall, I think it was a good review, good looking at this content. So thanks, guys. I'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good one.